Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. It's strange how silence can scream the loudest in a marriage. On the outside, Emily and Jason looked perfect, an enviable couple draped in the comfort of routine. Their smiles at family gatherings, their photos framed in golden light, all carefully placed memories that told the world they had it all. But what the world didn't see, what Emily barely admitted to herself, was the empty space that had grown between their bodies, like a silent ocean stretching wider every night. Emily used to feel seen. His gaze used to burn through her, make her skin ache with longing. But now, Jason's eyes wandered, past her, through her, as if she were just another piece of the furniture in their carefully curated life. His late nights at work, his quick excuses, the way his phone became more intimate to him than her own touch, it all formed a puzzle Emily was too afraid to solve. She didn't know when the distance began, but she could feel it. In the hollow way he kissed her forehead. In the way he'd climb into bed beside her, turn off the lamp, and drift into dreams where she could never follow. And so, alone in their king-sized bed, Emily searched for herself again. In the dark, she reached for something, anything, that would remind her she was still alive, still desired, still worthy of her own attention. One night, while the moon spilled pale light across their bedroom walls, Emily touched herself, not out of rebellion, but out of a deep, aching need to feel connected to someone, even if that someone was just her. Her breath faltered, her body trembling beneath the thin cotton sheets. She thought she was alone. She needed to be alone. But when her half-lidded eyes flickered toward the doorway, she saw him. Jason. Standing there. Watching. Saying nothing. His face unreadable. His presence as cold as the night air. And in that moment, a silent question passed between them, electric and dangerous. What now? Was he disgusted? Curious? Or had he been watching her like this before? Emily's heart slammed against her ribs as her hand froze mid-movement. His silence didn't condemn her. It didn't comfort her either. It simply existed, like a phantom between them. And in that unbearable quiet, she realized, Jason had secrets too. But whose secret would destroy them first? Jason didn't speak that night. He simply turned, the soft sound of his retreating footsteps swallowed by the thick hush of the house. Emily lay there, her breath catching in her throat, heart racing not from shame, but from something else. Something she couldn't name yet. The next morning, they moved like strangers rehearsing old routines. Jason brewed the coffee, Emily buttered the toast. Their hands brushed briefly over the breakfast table, but neither flinched nor lingered. It was like their bodies had learned to function without touching what mattered. "Morning," he said, his voice low, unreadable. "Morning," she answered, the weight of the night pressing between them. They didn't speak of it, not the moment, not the silence, not his watching. It dangled over them like a fragile ornament, daring either of them to reach out and shatter it. But Jason's glances changed after that night. They lingered, heavy, curious, almost cautious. Emily caught him watching her when she folded laundry, when she wiped the counter, when she slipped her fingers absent-mindedly around the delicate chain at her neck. She wasn't sure if it was guilt she felt, or power. The memory of when things were different haunted her now. She remembered when Jason would pull her close in the middle of the grocery store, brushing his lips against her ear for no reason other than to remind her he couldn't wait to get her home. When did that man fade? When did he start sleeping with his back to her, locked in a world she no longer belonged to? Emily's suspicion bloomed in quiet moments, when he stepped outside to take phone calls he used to answer openly, when he changed his passcode, when his laughter on the line wasn't meant for her. She didn't ask. She wasn't ready to hear him lie. But the desire, that stubborn ember, still smoldered inside her. She ached to feel his skin, to pull him back into her orbit. She wanted to touch him in ways that would remind him who they used to be. Yet, she couldn't bridge the space between them, not when she didn't know if he still wanted to cross it. One evening, as she undressed in front of the mirror, she saw him again, just outside the bedroom door, watching her reflection. He didn't move. He didn't speak. And in his eyes, she saw something new. Was it longing? Was it regret? Or was he simply mourning what they had already lost? The space between Emily and Jason wasn't just in their bed anymore. It clung to them in the soft moments that used to be easy, the brush of his hand on her back as they passed in the hallway, the way he used to tuck loose strands of her hair behind her ear. Small gestures that once stitched them together had unraveled, thread by quiet thread. Jason had begun working late more often, his explanations vague but carefully delivered. Client meetings, last-minute deadlines, just a few more hours. Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to be the kind of wife who trusted without question. But trust isn't blind when you've learned to see too well. One evening, as Jason's shower steamed behind the bathroom door, Emily's fingers drifted to his phone left unattended on the nightstand. She hesitated, her pulse loud in her ears. She hated that she was here, becoming this woman, the one who needed proof instead of promises. The screen blinked awake, and her breath caught at the name pinned to the top of his messages, Claire. She knew the name, a colleague, someone he'd mentioned a few times. But she hadn't known they texted this late. She hadn't known they laughed like that in private spaces she was no longer invited to. Emily scrolled, searching for something undeniable, something that would let her feel either completely shattered or mercifully wrong. But the words danced in ambiguity. No outright confessions. No obvious betrayal. Just messages soaked in casual intimacy, inside jokes, unfinished sentences, the kind of softness Emily had once shared with him. The worst part? Jason sounded alive when he talked to Claire. He sounded like the man Emily used to know. When he stepped out of the bathroom, towels slung low on his hips, their eyes met. Emily's throat dried, her heart threatening to leap out of her chest. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice smooth, practiced. "Yeah," she lied, setting the phone back down as if it hadn't burned her fingers. That night, she let him kiss her. She let him undress her, his hands roaming her body with an urgency that felt almost like guilt. But even as their skin met, even as their breath tangled in the dark, Emily couldn't stop wondering if he was touching her, or chasing someone else through her. The next day, Emily found herself lingering too long at the cafe near her office, where a soft-spoken barista named Daniel had been quietly admiring her for weeks. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on her lips when she spoke, the careful way he remembered her order, the small, private attentions that Jason no longer offered. She told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. She just needed to feel seen again. But as Daniel brushed her fingers while handing her coffee, Emily's heart trembled, not from guilt, but from the dangerous comfort of being noticed. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one crossing invisible lines. Emily stood in front of the mirror, fingertips grazing the delicate curve of her collarbone, as if touching herself could help her remember who she was before all of this. The woman who loved with certainty, who believed without hesitation. But that woman felt so distant now, like a fading echo in a room she could no longer enter. The nights with Jason had become unpredictable. Sometimes, he touched her with a hunger that almost convinced her they were whole again. Other nights, he barely noticed when she slipped into bed beside him. It was the in-between that was destroying her. The not knowing. The silent weight of words unsaid. Daniel's presence had become her quiet escape. He never asked too much. He never pushed. But the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was still worth chasing, it began to fill the hollow spaces Jason no longer reached. One late afternoon, as rain drummed softly against the cafe windows, Daniel's hand lingered over hers just a heartbeat too long. Emily didn't pull away. She felt it, that pull, that forbidden spark, and for a terrifying second, she let herself wonder what it would be like to let him in completely. But her heart was still tethered to Jason, wasn't it? Or was it just the memory of him she couldn't release? That night, Jason came home early. No excuses. No unread messages. Just him. He took her in his arms, clumsily, almost desperately, his lips pressing against her like he was trying to reclaim something slipping through his fingers. "I miss you," he whispered into her neck, his voice cracking in a way she hadn't heard in months. It should have melted her. It should have anchored her. But Emily didn't know if he missed her or the version of her he'd stopped paying attention to. "Then why do you keep leaving?" Her voice broke, trembling as the question she'd buried for too long finally surfaced. Jason pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes raw, guilty, searching. And in that moment, they were both standing on the edge of something dangerous. One step forward could either save them or destroy them completely. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. And in the stillness, Emily realized they were both starving, for honesty, for touch, for something real. But maybe it was already too late. Jason's arms tightened around Emily as if he feared she might vanish if he let go. But what he didn't know was that she had already started drifting, piece by piece, thought by thought, into a space where he no longer lived. His breath trembled against her skin. "I've been distant because I didn't know how to face you." Emily's heart skipped. Was this it? The confession? The hidden truth she had been waiting for, or dreading? Jason slowly turned her to face him, his hands cupping her cheeks as if grounding himself in her presence. His eyes shimmered with something she hadn't seen in a long time, fear, desperation, maybe even love, though it looked different now. "I've been seeing someone." His words crashed into her like ice water, sharp and unrelenting. "But it's not what you think. It's not about her. It was never about her. It was about me, trying to remember who I was before I ruined this." Emily's throat closed. Her? Was it Claire? The woman from the messages? The soft, shadowy presence who had already carved a quiet place between them? But Jason's next words shattered that assumption. "It's Daniel." The name struck her like a fault line cracking beneath her feet. Her Daniel. The barista whose kind eyes and careful silences had been her escape. Jason's next breath was shallow, his voice breaking. "I saw the way you looked at him. And I hated him for it. I hated myself for needing to know why he saw you when I'd forgotten how." Emily stumbled backward, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. "You knew him?" Jason nodded, his jaw tightening. "He's not just some stranger at a coffee shop. He's someone I met months ago. I didn't plan it. I didn't even realize what was happening at first. I thought maybe I could outrun whatever was breaking in me by being near someone who didn't know all the ways I'd already failed." The air between them thickened with betrayal and impossible understanding. Jason's confession didn't erase her hurt, but it twisted it, reshaped it into something more complex than just simple abandonment. She wanted to scream, to run, to press her palms to his chest and demand to know how far it had gone. But the words tangled in her throat. Because now she saw it, his silence, his detachment, his desperate touches, they were all symptoms of a man unraveling in ways she had never noticed. Jason's hands trembled as he whispered, "You weren't the only one trying to feel alive again." Emily's legs weakened beneath her as the weight of the moment collapsed on them both. The betrayal wasn't just his. It was mutual. It had always been. Emily's chest heaved as Jason's words echoed in her mind, reshaping every memory, every silence, every unfinished touch between them. The betrayal she thought she understood had twisted into something she never imagined. It wasn't just another woman. It wasn't even about Claire. It was Daniel. The man who had gently, carefully, quietly been filling Emily's cracks, was the same man who had unknowingly held Jason's. The betrayal was so layered it almost didn't feel real. She could still feel Daniel's fingertips grazing hers across a coffee cup, still hear Jason's breathless confessions, and somehow, all of it collapsed into a strange, aching symmetry. They had both sought Daniel in different ways, both been seen by him, both fallen, without realizing they were colliding toward the same center. Jason's voice trembled. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid if I spoke it aloud, it would break us beyond repair. Emily's vision blurred with tears, not just for the betrayal, but for how desperately they had both been searching for something to hold on to, something that would make them feel alive again. You already broke us, she whispered, her voice soft, hollow. But maybe I did too. Jason stepped forward, as if his body still believed he could reach her, still believed there was something left to save. I still love you. I never stopped. Emily's breath shuddered. She wanted to scream, to crumble, to beg for answers, but what haunted her more was the weight of what she already knew. She still loved him too. Through the wreckage, through the betrayal, through the mess, they were still bound. But then, the final fracture. Emily's phone buzzed on the nightstand. A single text from Daniel: I couldn't lie to either of you anymore. I love you. Both of you. Her knees weakened, the weight of the impossible choice crashing down on her. The man she had trusted to be her safe harbor was the very same man Jason had escaped to. And Daniel, he hadn't been caught in the middle. He had chosen to stand there. Jason's eyes flicked to the phone, reading the message, his face collapsing into something raw and devastated. They weren't just fractured. They were entangled. And maybe they had been all along. The story didn't end with one leaving the other. It ended with them both realizing they might never fully leave. Emily sat quietly on the edge of their bed, the weight of her phone pressing into her palm like an unopened door she no longer had the courage to walk through. Jason stood across the room, his shoulders tense, his gaze lost in the fibers of the carpet. Neither of them moved to close the distance anymore. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer sharp. It wasn't cold. It had softened, dulled by exhaustion and quiet understanding. They had both crossed lines. They had both sought comfort elsewhere. They had both broken each other. But as Emily stared at the final message from Daniel, she realized something else. There were no villains here. Just two people clinging to their own sinking pieces, trying to feel alive in ways they didn't know how to ask for. Jason finally spoke, his voice stripped bare. I think I wanted him because I couldn't face losing you. And maybe I already had. Maybe we both did long before any of this. Emily's throat tightened, her heart aching with the painful clarity that some stories don't end with one person walking away, they end with both learning to let go, even if a part of them will always stay. She looked at Jason, tears finally slipping free. I loved you. I still do. But I think we stopped loving ourselves somewhere along the way. His nod was slow, heavy. Yeah. I think you're right. There were no shouts, no slammed doors, no dramatic goodbyes. Just two people who had finally laid down their weapons, realizing the war was never between them, it was inside them. They didn't speak of Daniel again. Some threads were too tangled to unwind. Emily moved out 2 weeks later, not in anger but with quiet finality. She found a small apartment where the silence didn't suffocate, where her own breathing didn't feel like someone else's memory. Jason stayed in the house, the walls echoing with both their ghosts. They met for coffee sometimes. They even smiled. But the intimacy, the weight, the fire, it had lived and it had burned out. Love, Emily realized, isn't always about staying. Sometimes, love is about knowing when to let someone go, even if you still carry them in the quiet places. And maybe, just maybe, that's where we love the deepest. In the letting go.